Today I have the privilege of sharing another fascinating Flat Earth presentation from Hervé Reboni, which will be added to my Hervé Reboni playlist, which you can find here. For those who are new to this discussion, Hervé was a professional sailor who crossed the Atlantic 8 times and circumnavigated our entire flat Earth as a participant in the Whitbread 1993-1994 race. As Hervé has discussed in prior videos, as part of the Cabal's process to change our flat Earth reality into a false globe, the controllers artificially enlarged the northern hemisphere and simultaneously shrunk the southern hemisphere. In other words, actual distances in the east-west direction in the northern hemisphere are shorter than claimed by maps and the globe, while in the southern hemisphere, actual distances between points are farther away. But the same does not apply in the north-south direction. This deception has created various telltale signs of manipulation. Due to his experience in sailing, Hervé noticed that actual distances were shorter in the northern hemisphere and farther in the southern hemisphere. In addition, both false magnetic declination adjustments and time zones certainly hide these changes. In my opinion, the time zone deception is the most obvious, since there are only 19 time zones in the northern hemisphere, while there are 31 to 32 time zones in the southern hemisphere. That only makes sense on the flat Earth. In his last presentation, Hervé also showed us how road map scales in the north are wrong. Road maps have been artificially stretched to hide the fact that driving distances don't match the distances of nautical mile straight pathways of airplanes and boats. To be clear, your driving distance aren't wrong. Driving distances cannot be altered, but nautical mile pathways of airplanes and boats can be altered. But the controllers had to make it appear as though the driving distances match the nautical mile distances of the straight pathways of airplanes and boats. For example, an airplane that supposedly flies at 520 knots may actually only be flying at 260 knots. I'll have links in the description to Hervé's prior discussions on these topics if you haven't seen them. This next presentation builds on the roadmap presentation by showing how boat speeds based on nautical miles are artificially inflated. It's very difficult for a sailor to determine independently how fast he's actually traveling, and that's how the controllers have gotten away with this. For the first part of the presentation, Hervé shows how the official recordings of the American Cup competition were artificially sped up to make it appear as though the boats were traveling faster than they actually were. Officially, those boats supposedly travel up to 80 kilometers per hour or 50 miles per hour, but the actual speed is much less. You'll see how the movements of the sailors appear much more natural when slowed down by approximately 30%, and that when the official video is compared to independent footage from a spectator, you can see the speeds of the boats have been artificially increased. For the second part of the video, Hervé goes into detail about the apparent wind angle used in sailing. Officially, those American Cup boats are supposedly traveling at 80 kilometers per hour. He demonstrates that those speeds are physically impossible for sailing. This part may seem confusing, but when his car was parked, the true wind angle came from behind the car and to the right at 135 degrees, as indicated by the weather vane. But as he began accelerating, the apparent wind angle shifts to the front of the car. A sailor would be aiming for an apparent wind angle of 27 degrees to inflate the sails, and that angle becomes impossible as the car travels faster than 45 kilometers per hour. A sailboat cannot travel faster than approximately 45 kilometers per hour because the forward apparent wind angle makes it impossible to inflate the sails. Very interesting. Based on the evidence Hervé has uncovered, we can see the methods of the controllers have used to create the phony sphere, which confirms our flat Earth reality. Anyways, let's get to Hervé's presentation. Enjoy.
Hello. In this video, we are going to observe the speed of the boat. We will prove that the official boat speed is false.
But they always got to keep it in mind. We've seen that too many times during this so far. How different the restore there is in these new modern boats that are going 3 or 4 times.
This video follows the previous video on distances, where we observed that the distances on the maps, in particular the distances as crow flies, are also wrong by about double. That is to say that the scale of the distances on the maps are twice too large. This to corresponds to the distance of the globe. And as these distances are twice too great for journey as the crow flies, and the speed of plane and boats are also going to be too big by half. That is to say, a plane which officially flies at 900 km per hour, in reality flies at 450 km per hour or less. And a boat which sails at 25 knots, that is to say approximately 46 km per hour, will actually travel in a straight line half. So I suggest you watch the video on distances to fully understand the subterfuge. Now, if we try to put ourselves in the place of the manipulators, we understand that we have the reality of a flat earth. Here it is a glisten. In my opinion, it is not accurate, but to simplify, we will take this one. So we have a flat earth, which is reality, and the controllers want to make a sphere from this flat earth. So the controllers know that the boats are going to go around it. So it will be necessary that this distance, which goes around the continents by the certain latitude, must be quite similar to the distance they will make under the ball and agree with the fall speeds and distances. So this distance here under the globe must be similar to the distance there. I say similar because looking at the speed averages of the Vendée Globe boat, these averages seem too low to me, even taking into account the fall speed. Because in these latitudes, the weather conditions are optimal for achieving the best speed averages. So the manipulators will not have the choice to make a globe on the basis of a flat earth to artificially stretch the Earth's surface so that this distance is similar to that. So in the center here we have less Earth surface than on the ball. There will be a lot more on the sphere. So they will have to artificially stretch this surface to create the maps of the globe. And then they have no choice to cheat with the distances and the speeds. And the manipulators have another parameter to respect. The manufacturer of this globe must have a certain dimension. The globe must be large enough to have a perspective that is similar to the flat earth. For example, a person looking at the horizon at the seaside, the angular resolution of the human eye must resemble the curvature of a sphere of 40,000 km in circumference. So they have no other choice than to make a big sphere and to map it. They will have to cheat with the distances and speeds. And we also saw in the previous video that the manipulators have established two systems of distance units. We have the units of distance on the road, which are kilometers and statute miles, and we have nautical miles, which are used by boats and planes. And this unit of distance, nautical miles, is very difficult to control. Since you cannot run alongside a plane or a boat with the wheel to measure and your watch on your wrist to check their speed. So the controllers know very well that with this unit of distance they will be able to cheat, and it is on this unit of distance that they will make the sphere. This unit of distance is the latitude. Each degree of latitude corresponds to 60 minutes, and officially 1 minute equals 1,852 meters. But in reality, 1 minute on flat Earth will be about half. So they will be able to create a big ball with a small flat Earth. This transformation is not discrete. Transforming this flat surface into a globe with the ocean and continents enlarged and distorted will be complicated. That's why obviously there are subterfuges of distance and speeds we also saw in the first two videos on magnetic declination. That the magnetic declination will be used to correct the directions that we will have to take with the compass. Because on the flat Earth, if you go from point A to point B, you will have a certain heading to take with your compass. But as on the globe the Earth's surface has been stretched and deformed, we will no longer have the same direction from point A to point B with the compass in relation to magnetic north. And it is therefore the pseudo-magnetic declination which will make the correction from the false maps of the globe to the reality of the flat Earth. And as we saw in the last video, the distances are wrong, and as we will see now, the speed are wrong. Firstly, I can confirm that it's very difficult to assess your own speed on a boat. You advance on a surface that is moving, the waves cause the appearance of the sea to continually change, you have no point of reference. You also have the boat which must push the water, which is braked by the water and forced in opposition to the wind, which pushes the sails and the rigging. And this world environment gives an impression of power, of speed, but in reality it is very difficult to correctly evaluate one's own speed. I myself have spent the majority of my life on the water and have never noticed this error or subterfuge. So the manipulators know that they can cheat with this distance and speed. But to study this file, it is the matrix which will help us to expose this rigging with the sport TV broadcast of America's Cup. The images of which you see here. The America's Cup is a sailboat race. It is the oldest sport trophy in the world. Since 1851, over the years, the boat models have evolved, and these are boats that are at the top of what is being done in sailing for their time. These are not boats that are safe enough to cross the Atlantic or even sail on the high seas. But they are very efficient sailboats, and now the latest boat models have appendage with foil on each side of the hull. The sailboat leans on the foil and thus the hull takes off from the water, and there is less friction on the water, which allows them to reach very good speed. And what is interesting for us as flat earthers is that we will have live information of what is happening on the boat. Like here, for example, we will have live the speed of the boat here, which is 34.6 knots, and the wind speed, which is 12.9 knots. The other information is less interesting for our study. And we see the way in which these sport broadcasts are filmed, that we have very little possibility of evaluating the speed of the boat because the shots are very short and we rarely have a fixed point with the camera stationary where we could time the boats. But if we look at a lot of them, we end up finding some, and you will see that we will be able to time a boat passing in the front of a fixed point and compare it with the live speed of the boat that the production of the show provides us. We will see now how the crew move on the boat, and you will see that the movements are very jerky, and this for good reason. It is because the TV broadcast is accelerated by around 25% or more in order to make the speed on the water more plausible. Here is the speed at which the TV show is made. You see how they move, it's jerky, it's not natural.
On va mettre d'autres exemples. Maintenant, si je refais
Now if I repeat the same sequence but make it 25% slower, we have a better appreciation of the real movement of the cruise.
réellement la vitesse qu'ils ont. Là, je l'ai mis à 25% moins rapide. Là, on a une meilleure idée de comment se déplacent
Okay, there it slowed down by 25%. There is more logical. You see how the movements are more flexible and more natural.
Lui aussi, là, il va sauter dans ce bateau. Voilà.
Talk about efficiency. Watch Peter Bullen here. There we go. Settles efficiency. Watch Peter Bullen here. There we go. Settles it.
Carries on still. Mine. Right, speed, they can check whenever. Yep. Hard hit on this one, Tom. Yeah, copy that. I'll watch for his water. He's just behind our 90 at the moment, so we'll be matching.
Note that even 25% slowed down, I still find that it's fast to move on a boat.
Right, speed, they can check whenever. Yep. Hard hit on this one, Tom. Yeah, copy that. I'll watch for his water. He's just behind our 90 at the moment, so we'll be matching.
Here, all these videos are on YouTube. You can estimate for yourself how much the TV show is accelerated.
Estimez par vous-même de combien elles ont été accélérées.
Then, obviously, the greater the acceleration, the greater the difference between the official speed and the real speed will be.
Et puis, la version officielle est encore plus grande que ça. Donc maintenant,
Now we are going to time the boat which pass in front of a fixed point, and do not hesitate to pause the video to fully understand the calculation. Here, without adjusting the speed, we see that there is already 12 km per hour difference. By adjusting 25% of the trick speed, there is a difference of 27 km per hour, which as a percentage makes 37.5%.
au minimum. Différence entre la vitesse officielle et la vitesse
Difference between the official speed and the real speed close to 20 km per hour for a minimum of 30%. Difference between official speed and real speed with only 25% adjustment, 23 km per hour, close to 30% difference.
Here we can compare the speed with the buoy for the boat and the sign at the side of the road.
In this case, the difference between the official speed and the real speed is 47.5%, and this without changing the artificially accelerated speed of the shooting on TV, which is confirmed by looking at the jerky head movement of the cruise. This is an amateur video, so we can certainly think that the speed has not been changed. We do not have the official speed of the boat, but we can estimate it by comparing the data for the same America's Cup boat. Here, by looking at the appearance of the water, we can estimate the wind between 12 and 13 knots, and the boat is upwind. On the left, we have the data of American Magic during the America's Cup. Its official speed is 35 knots and the wind speed between 13 and 14 knots. And just like in the amateur video, it goes up the wind. In my opinion, the difference in official and the real speed is visible to the naked eye. We see that the sails are well inflated and the hull well above the water, which confirm an official speed of at least 32 knots. Difference between the official speed and the real speed 20 km per hour or 33.8%.
Voilà, maintenant j'aimerais attirer votre attention.
I would also like to draw your attention to the speeds that the American Cup boat can achieve with a certain wind speed.
So we see here that we have 12 knots of wind speed. We will see what speed these boats are capable to achieving downwind. There they go upwind. They will circle around the buoy and go downwind with the wind, and we will see in the downwind what official speed these boats reach with a wind speed of 12 knots. Here we have the speed of the New Zealand boat. It accelerates by turning around the buoy, and we will see that it will maintain a speed of 44 knots, which is officially 81.5 kilometers per hour with 12 knots of wind speed.
43 nœuds avec 12 nœuds de vent réel. Donc comme vous l'avez vu,
so, as you have seen, these boats with 12 knots of wind speed are capable of reaching an official speed of 44 knots, which corresponds to more than 80 kilometers per hour. And there is a way to control these speeds with the apparent wind angle. So these boats are not as fast as the official version claims, but for sailboat it is still impressive, and these boats obtain their best downwind speed at 135 degrees, thanks precisely to the apparent wind that they create with their own speed. So what is the apparent wind angle? The apparent wind angle is the wind angle that you have on the boat, which is combined between the real wind angle and the speed of the boat. And it is with this apparent wind angle that we adjust the sails, since it is the direction from which the wind comes on the boat. Then, if the boat is stopped, the weather vane shows the direction of the true wind, but the more the boat accelerates, the more the weather vane will turn towards the front of the boat. And therefore, the faster the boat goes, the more the weather vane will turn, and these boats in downwind have an apparent wind angle between 26 and 28 degrees. And that's right, it's very tight and it's really impressive, it must be said. So between 26 and 28 degrees, we will take 27 for the example. This means that the weather vane should indicate 27 degrees when the boat is sailing downwind. So let's see what angle 27 degrees correspond to on the weather vane. So if I take the weather vane and place it on the 27 degree line, so the edge of the tail of the weather vane must be aligned with the interior edge of the marker. By the way, we notice that the sports broadcast on TV does not reveal the apparent wind angle in the information available live, and this for good reason. Like this, the edge of the tail aligns with the edge of the mark for an angle of 27 degrees, just a little bit inside the V of the weather vane. These boats are capable with their speed of sailing downwind with 27 degrees of apparent wind angle, which is very close, because they still go fast, not as fast as the official version, but still for a sailboat it is very fast. But they still need to have at least 27 degrees of apparent wind angle. Why? The true wind comes from this direction, but with the progress of the boat, we saw that the apparent wind shifts, and therefore, so the speed of the boat means that the apparent wind angle, or where the wind is coming from when we are on the boat, will be this direction. So here we have an apparent wind angle of 27 degrees.
Eh bien, ces bateaux-là qui sont à la pointe de la technologie, ils sont capables, avec un angle de vent apparent...
These boats, which are at the cutting edge of technology, need this wind angle so that the stream of the air pass on both sides of the sail.
Pour que les filets d'air passent des deux côtés.
So the stream of the air pass on both sides of the head sail and also the main sail.
Les filets d'air, donc de vent apparent, ils passent des deux côtés de la voile ici et aussi de la grand voile. On a la grand voile ici.
When the streams of air slide on each side of the sail, we call this laminar flow, and it is in laminar flow that the sail performs best and the boat reaches its best speeds. Then the sails must have at least these 27 degrees, because if it is less than that, let's say for example that the wind comes from here,
Depuis ici, là, ça ferait un angle peut-être.
that would be an angle of maybe 16 or 70 degrees. So at that point the sails will have too much wind on the outside here and not enough on the inside, and the sail will flap in the wind like a flag.
Les voiles, elles vont battre comme des drapeaux. Puis à ce moment-là, évidemment.
And at this moment, obviously, there is no more power, the boat stops. So the interesting question we are going to ask ourselves, it is, with 12 knots of wind speed, with a true wind angle of 135 degrees, will we be able to keep an apparent wind angle of 27 degrees at 80 kilometers per hour, which is the boat speed of 44 knots? But if at 80 kilometers per hour there is no more wind angle, if the weather vane indicates that the wind is coming directly from opposite, then if the wind is coming from opposite, you cannot inflate the sail. The sails will flap in the wind like a flag and the boat will not be able to move forward. It is absolutely necessary that at 80 kilometers per hour we can maintain an angle like this of 27 degrees to be able to inflate the sails.
Soit aligné avec le bord ici.
If the weather vane is like that, a sailing boat cannot move forward if the wind is in the front. It is impossible. So we are going to do the experiment in the field with the car to see if it's possible. We have the true wind angle at 135 degrees relative to the direction of the boat, or the car in our case, and we go on a very straight road. We will see how the weather vane behaves as it moves forward and what its the apparent wind angle will be.
Vont réagir la girouette par rapport à l'angle de vent apparent.
Time for the anemometer to stabilize, and we can see that the average speed is above 12 knots. If the wind is stronger, this will favor the official version. So obviously, the more we accelerate, the more the apparent wind angle turns toward the front of the boat, or in this case, the car. So now we are at 30 kilometers per hour. At 30 kilometers per hour, we can already see that the wind angle is already closing a lot. Now, there is approximately on average 35 degrees of wind angle.
35 degrés du vent, là, on dira, en moyenne. À 30 km/h.
Now I accelerate. Now we are at 40 kilometers per hour. $50 kilometers per hour. $60 kilometers per hour. We see the weather vane is facing the wind now. When we no longer have any wind angle like that, we can no longer inflate the sails on the boat. and I am just at 60 kilometers per hour. 44 knots is 81 kilometers per hour. And now I am at 75 kilometers per hour. Look at the weather vane. The weather vane has the apparent wind in the front of the boat at 75 kilometers per hour. So we cannot be at 40 knots, officially 75 kilometers per hour, with a wind speed of 12 knots, because there is no longer an apparent wind angle. We no longer have a wind angle to inflate the sails. But now if I slow down, maybe the boats go 50 or 45 kilometers per hour.
50 ou 45 km/h.
That gives this. There we see there is a trend of a little less than 30 degrees. This is what we need to fill the sails.
Les voiles quand elles sont très fermées.
Well, there obviously, if I slow down and stop, the weather vane returns to its initial position at 135 degrees from the true wind angle.
Elle reprend son angle à 135 degrés, évidemment.
And we will resume measuring the wind speed.
Du vent.
Here the same thing, let the anemometer stabilize, and on average there is more than 12 knots of wind.
Alors maintenant, j'aimerais
I would also like to draw your attention to 2 or 3 things that we can see on this broadcast of the America's Cup. There we see where the spectator boats are located. Here the shot from the helicopter. We will see that we will rise, and this will allow us to evaluate the distances.
On va pouvoir évaluer un peu les distances. Vous voyez, si je mets sur pause ici,
I pause. You see how big the body of water is. Of course, they use zoom and it will crush the image a little bit. But seen from above like that, it gives us a good idea of the distances, with the spectator boats and the 2 America's Cup sailboats.
si on continue,
So remember, where is the spectator's boat?
et on va repasser.
And the production now shows us the CGI plan, which is therefore a modeling of the race course. And we see that the distances are much greater.
Beaucoup plus grande.
In fact, this image represents the difference in distance between the globe and the flat Earth. This so that the distances and the speeds corresponds to those of the globe. We can draw a parallel with the previous video on the distances, where we saw that on the GPS in the truck that the curves were much more flattened to be able to stretch the distances. So it's exactly the same subterfuge. They enlarge the distances to make them correspond to those of the globe, and officially the speed here is 23.7 knots, which corresponds to 44 kilometers per hour. But in reality, its speed in a straight line on a globe is close to half. So why this CGI modeling? As we see, here they drew line of 100 meters which correspond to those of the globe, and the boat must cross these lines of 100 meters at the speed which correspond to those of the globe, and therefore they do not have no choice but to cheat with speed. And thus with false speed give the illusion of a boat which moves over the distances of the globe.
Et de pouvoir faire accélérer les bateaux plus rapidement sur un plan d'eau élargi.
Now with this new parameter of distances and speeds, they are subject of the flat Earth subfile, which are much more logical, like a small enclosed sun which eats locally.
Très local, petit et proche.
We understand better than when we move away from the sun, whether north or south, of a real 200 kilometers as the crow flies, we feel the heat diminish.
À partir de 400 km, si vous écartez du soleil, vous allez avoir moins de chaleur.
It's more logical with the small flatter.
On peut aussi, par exemple,
We can also take the example of the ISS, the subterfuge of a plane with certain accessories which cycles above a small flat Earth will be easier to achieve with speeds at least 2 times slower.
une grande terre plate où il faudrait que l'avion aille beaucoup plus vite.
So that is more logical too. There is also the flight of plane which makes Santiago to Sydney, which seems to pass through the southern latitude. On a smaller flat Earth, with the help of the jet streams, it is much more possible.
Tout ça a beaucoup plus de sens maintenant.
We can also wonder why the manipulators take so many risks with these TV broadcasts by creating subterfuges like this, which could expose them. Well, now the answer is that now they no longer have a choice. With the technological advances that are available to the public, if, for example, 50 or 60 years ago a boat was sailing at 7 knots, so officially 13 kilometers per hour, but in reality it was sailing at 8 or 9 kilometers per hour, there was only 4 or 5 kilometers per hour difference. And as I said, it's very difficult to assess your speed on a boat. We didn't see the difference. But now with the technology, the boats go at 40 and even 50 knots, that's close to 100 kilometers per hour, that's almost 50 kilometers per hour more. So they have no choice but to invent subterfuges like in this sport show so that we continue to believe their lies.
En accélérant, entre autres, les bateaux pendant les retransmissions.
We can compare it to the launch of the Nikon P900 when this technology was available to the public and the official narrative was completely exposed.
Eh bien, le narratif officiel a été complètement exposé.